Jeff Bozanic is a member of the 1972 Eagle Scout class and has been involved in scouting from the day he began as a shy young boy. And in the years since, he has excelled and distinguished himself as a world-renowned underwater scuba diver, instructor, and researcher. He holds a PhD in education, owns a consulting business, and travels all around the world for both his work and for adventure. Among his numerous awards, honors, and distinctions, he's the recipient of Scouting Silver Beaver Award, a Vigil Honor member of the Order of the Arrow, Nice's Outstanding Eagle Scout Award, and is a Fellow in the Royal Geographical Society. Hey, thanks for tuning into this episode of Eagle Scouts Worldviews, and we're happy to be with Jeff today. You heard a brief introduction about Jeff and his life experiences, and I have no doubt you're eager to learn a little bit more about it from the man himself. So Jeff, there you are. Hello from Indiana, out there in sunny California.
It is a great day today, and thank you so much for having me on your program today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to all the other scouts and the interested people out who wish to learn more about the scouting program.
Absolutely. We really appreciate your being with us today. The long-term weather forecast for the upcoming season shows a little bit more precipitation than you've had for the past few years out in California. I hope your reservoirs fill a little bit more after the snowy winter. Hey, let's get into the first question. When we talked previously, you had mentioned that when you were growing up as a little boy, you were a bookworm and you tended to isolate yourself socially from other people. But then you joined scouting and things started to change in terms of how you approach life. Could you talk a little bit about how scouting took you away from an isolated to a more socialized kind of life?
Well, the reality is that you can't be isolated in scouting. The patrol method and learning to work with other youth was an important part of the program, and it's part of the program that worked very well for me personally. And going on from there, the way the scouting program is structured, it encourages youth, boys and girls now, to take more of an active position with respect to leadership and with respect to guiding others. And so, even though I started as a complete introvert and a bookworm, you had to work with groups, you had to work with your patrol to cook, you had to work with your patrol to set up your tents, you had to work with your patrol on your advancement skills and learning, and then later you had to work with not only your patrol, but other patrols and other youth within the troop to be able to teach them the same skills and pass on the same knowledge that you'd learned in prior experiences and prior years. And so the whole structure of the scouting program really encouraged me to come out of my shell and to provide much more active interaction with other people, my peers, other people my age, and with adults at the same time.
So what you're talking about is in direct contrast to typical formal education settings, that somebody can be shy, retiring, and very quiet, sitting in the back of the classroom, and that's not an environment that will pull somebody out, but scouting kind of forces that, huh?
Scouting not only forces that, it encourages it, and it provides a skill set that you don't learn in school. I was an introvert in school and able to do quite well as far as the school was concerned. I was getting straight A's in my classes. I sat back and I didn't cause problem for the teachers. When I knew the material, I would sit and read a book, which didn't necessarily make my teachers happy, but because I knew the material, they didn't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in the school program that forced me to socialize or encouraged me to develop my skills in leadership, which is, I'm really thankful for it from the scouting program.
That's a great story. You know, it occurs to me, and I had an occasion to meet some people over the weekend who have, for their whole educational experience, were homeschooled. And they did say that one of the challenges they have is we're developing good social skills. So instantly I'm thinking about a homeschooled student would probably flourish in scouting, or at least be able to benefit from that kind of injection of the social milieu.
I wholeheartedly agree. In fact, I'm working with a homeschool unit right now in providing them with some background and helping them interact with other troops, and not just their own troop. But it's really encouraging and gratifying to see these kids that really don't have much social interaction starting to learn how to interact with other people their own age through the scouting program.
Yeah. Hey, everybody seems to have a favorite part of their scouting experience in terms of activities. I wonder if you look back at your scouting experience as a youth, did you have something that was your favorite activity or set of activities that you remember quite fondly?
Absolutely. My favorite activities were those where I was outside. And that's really strange coming from a bookworm and a nerd, because that wasn't the sort of thing that nerds typically do. But I was introduced to camping. In fact, my first camp out was abysmal. It rained the entire weekend. I spent the night in my tent sitting upright in a pool of water about 2 inches deep because I'd set my tent right up in front of a gully, and nobody told me otherwise, that that was a good, bad, or indifferent thing to do. But it was flat and sandy, and I thought, oh, this looks like a good place. But the opportunity to be outside and to learn skills when I was outside and interact with nature and to push myself was in large part probably what kept me in scouting even after I earned my Eagle rank. And the other part of that is it allowed me to spend a lot of time with my father. Our troop was a backpacking troop. We went on a backpacking trip every month. We went on a week-long trip at least twice a year. Summertime was always backpacking 50 to 70 miles in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. And springtime might be another backpacking trip, or it might be a canoeing trip down the Colorado River. But we did this religiously the entire time I was in scouting. And those opportunities to bond with my dad and to share those experiences with my brother and to share those experiences with my friends, and quite frankly, to challenge myself in a way that other people, my peers in school, never challenged themselves, really set me apart and brought me not only a lot of personal satisfaction, but a skill set that set me apart from the other youth that I was with in school, and later set me apart from my university peers, providing me opportunities to do research science in the outdoors that others didn't get the chance to do because they just didn't have the skill set they needed to be able to work outdoors. So it was the outdoor activities that I loved in scouting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly outdoor activities are a major part of the scouting experience, or should be in most troops. And I don't know if you talked about almost a high adventure theme for your troop when you were growing up. I don't know of too many troops that are like that, but I am familiar with the venturing program and some of the venturing crews that specialize in high adventure, and they live a great experience through the venturing program.
The venturing program offers a ton of opportunities for youth. Our venturing crew, I'm a crew chairman for a venturing crew. We took 20 youth to Antarctica in 2021. And that was after I'd taken one youth in 2019 on one of my research trips to see what that would be like. We had 6 of our scouts live underwater in an underwater habitat for 24 hours as part of a scientific mission earlier this year. Um, our crew has been on backpacking trips at Philmont and in excess of 100 miles in Philmont and Northern Tier at our national canoeing base, and Sea Base, which offers a scuba diving program, which is my passion. That's what most of my research work is done in. Provide gateways to experiences that may open up lifelong passions, um, either avocations or vocationally, that you might not get otherwise. So even though a particular unit, either scouting or venturing, may not specifically be aimed at doing high adventure activities, those opportunities are available to any youth in any scouting program. And I highly, highly recommend that if you don't have the opportunity to do that within your own unit, join another unit and go on one of those trips because they're fabulous.
Yeah, you bet. If I weren't sworn to honesty and honor, I'd think about altering my birth certificate, moving to California, and joining your venturing crew. Wow.
We'd love to have you. We have a spot where we're going to Tanzania and Kenya on our next major trip.
Oh,
So we'll
geez.
take some adult volunteers if you're interested.
Don't treat me as too much of an adult, because I would be there to have a kid like fun, okay?
We actually had on our last trip to Antarctica, we had youth from all over the United States, from New Jersey to California, from Georgia to actually we had one scout from Canada even.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we as long as they join our crew as a multiple, we're more than happy to have them and welcome them with our crew.
You bet. You bet. Hey, as I look at your lived history, you're kind of an adventure kind of guy, mountain climbing and scuba diving, and not just a little foothill in California, and not just a 15-foot dive, but you take it to the extreme, to the point that I assume that you live in some pretty dangerous environments at times in your life. How do you deal with being in danger like that? How do you lower the odds that bad things will happen? And how is it you come across in such a way that you can talk about the experiences after the fact? I'm really curious about, because I'm certainly anything but a high adventure person like you. I just need to learn a little bit more about how you live.
You know, I've been extremely fortunate. I've worked on all 7 continents. I've scuba dove on all 7 continents. My diving has taken me from easy dives, like you said, 15 feet, to collecting new species of animals 360 feet deep. I've utilized my rock climbing experience that I started with in scouting to access scientific sites that other researchers couldn't get to, climbing seamounts in the middle of the oceans with waves crashing against them. And you're right, you run into experiences there that are more than challenging, that very easily could lead to not coming back. And so, how do you avoid that? Training, um, being ready to do what it is you're attempting to do. Falling back on Boy Scouts, be prepared, being ready for what it is you're going to face, having the right equipment, having the right skill set, having the right background to be able to deal with problems when they come up. Um, Experience in building up slowly so that you're able to cope with it, progressively advanced situations. And sometimes, quite frankly, there's an element of luck involved. I've got many friends that have perished doing similar activities. I'm not any better than they are. Sometimes you just got lucky. And knock on wood, I've been fortunate that not only my preparation and my background has got me ready to do these kinds of activities, but once in a while the dice roll in my direction.
Yeah. Well, I certainly hope they continue rolling in your direction. As you were talking, my mind went back just not too many years ago, and still is happening. People attempting to ascend K2 and Everest, who are woefully ill prepared, ill trained, but they're opportunists that will take these folks' money and lead them up the mountain into a really dangerous situation. I took a semester's worth of classes as a college phys ed credit in scuba diving, an entire semester to teach me to scuba dive. But I understand that there are places you can go on vacation down in the Caribbean, and in 15 minutes they'll teach you how to scuba dive. What would be your advice to people if be prepared is really something that has saved you? What would your advice be to people who are eager to do something, so eager that they would enter into it ill prepared?
You know, participating in any of these activities is a continuum. On one hand, you start as a beginner and you slowly learn and gain more experience and get to the point where you're able to participate in more. So you reference the type of programs where somebody goes to the Caribbean and they try a scuba dive for the first time. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody has to start somewhere. But those dives are typically very shallow, and you're with an instructor the entire time you're underwater. As you get beyond that, you go through some basic training, and even then, you need to gain experience slowly. So there's not much you can say. Everybody has to start somewhere. Obviously, I wouldn't start with giving somebody $50,000 and saying, I'm going to go climb Mount Everest. That's just not a safe thing to do, because in those levels of activity, you've got to have experience, you've got to have knowledge, you've got to have training to be able to have even a modicum of safety. But beyond that, the point is that you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to say, do I really know what I need to know to be where I'm at? And quite frankly, it's not just scuba diving or mountain climbing or other things that people would consider to be high risk. It's everything. I go out every weekend or every, many weekends hiking in our local mountains. I'm taking my scouts. Like a month ago, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we did an 11-mile day hike with 3,500 feet of elevation gain to the top of, very aptly, Mount Baden-Powell in California. And we carry our 10 essentials, and we carry extra water, and we know that we've got the things that we need should something unforeseen happen. And we're watching all of these people hiking up the same peak we are in tennis shoes, no water, or maybe a liter of water, a candy bar, no jacket or extra clothing, no first aid kit, no flashlight. And it doesn't take much to turn a fun activity into a life-threatening situation if you're not prepared. And so it's not just a matter of these high adventure activities that you should be prepared for, but nearly everything you do in life. And that's one of the strong lessons that I learned in scouting. Comes right back to our motto, be prepared.
Yeah. I've never really heard it referred to, but it seems to me that the scouting experience helps people heighten their understanding and situational awareness in ways that many people just take for granted. So I kind of like, yeah, I think I'll preach that a little while. That scouting also teaches or emphasizes situational awareness. And speaking of teaching and learning, speaking of Baden-Powell, you brought him up. Baden-Powell was an aficionado, if you will, of learning through immersive, hands-on, experiential approach. And you seem to embrace that same approach when you work with scouts and most likely with other adults as well. Could you talk a little bit about some of those immersive teaching and learning experiences that you've had? And do you think you're unique in their application or how you manage that experience in a teaching learning environment?
I believe that education best occurs in the environment where you need to apply it. So, and research backs that up. When we're teaching first aid, for example, we can teach first aid for snake bite, at our troop meetings, sitting inside our classroom or sitting inside our church hall or our VFW hall, wherever it is we have our unit meetings. But the reality is that doesn't stick the same way it does when you're outdoors. And so if you can move those educational opportunities to the environment in which the scouts might actually have to apply them, their recollection of that training and their ability to be able to handle those problems increases immeasurably. So for example, I mentioned snake bite. Rather than teach it in the classroom, on our hikes, I'll go on a hike, and while we're someplace in the wild, I'll trudge into the bush and I'll say, look over there. Look at how beautiful that is. Let's take a picture. And then I'll yelp, and I'll reach down and grab my ankle. Something bit me. And my scouts are like, oh my God, what's going on? And I'll go back to the trail and I'll sit down and I'll have one of them look at it. And before I go hiking, for example, I'll draw 2 red dots on my ankle, make it look like the fangs of a snake went into me. And now what happens is the scouts, the youth, go into a mode where they have to actually think about what may have happened, about what needs to be done to make sure that we're all safe in the environment, i.e. we've got to move away from where the snake is. They've got to think about what they've got to do, and then they've got to figure out how they're going to evacuate me and get me back to safety. And by having them think through that when they're actually out on a hike, it's a way, way different process and a much different level of engagement than when we're talking about it in the classroom, where some of the scouts are like, looking over here, they're watching the fly buzzing over there, they're watching the other patrols goofing off over on the other side. But when it's actually happening to them, it brings them in. It brings in all of their senses. They see what's happening. They smell the woods. They feel the adrenaline in their blood because this is for real. This is actually happening, at least as far as they know it's happening. And now they're in a panic because they've got to figure out what to do. And it makes them think in a way that you just don't think in the classroom. And you're right. I don't teach just my scouts that way. I teach everybody that way because that level of involvement, that getting all 5 of their senses actively engaged in what it is you're trying to train with them is thousands of percent more effective than just talking about it in a classroom setting and trying to teach them that way. And
Yeah.
do I think it's just me? Doesn't need to be. I have a PhD in education. That happens to be what my educational training is in. But the reality is that any leader, any teacher can do the same thing, whether that teacher is an adult leader or whether that teacher is a scout youth leader. All it takes is a little bit of imagination and more time to set up the lessons that you want to be learning and leaving more time for the youth to actually not only try to deal with the problems, but have the opportunity to make mistakes as well.
Yeah.
And in a hiking perspective, for example, my youth lead the trips. I have them plan the hikes. I may pick the hike because they don't know the sites the way I do, but they lay out the maps, they lay out the trail elevation, they figure out what it is they need. And my early hikes, I'll help them figure out how to tell where they are in the trail. But after that, they've got to tell me where they're at. And I've had youth take the wrong turn on a hike and I don't stop them. And they've walked, one time I had my youth walked 6 miles in the wrong direction before they finally figured out that I don't think we're in the right place, Mr. Bozanic. What's going on? And by allowing people to make mistakes, whether they're youth or adults, those lessons are cemented in a way that they would never be cemented if you corrected them and never allowed them to make a mistake. And obviously, I don't let my youth or any of my adults place themselves at risk or at jeopardy in terms of their safety. But you have to let them make mistakes and learn from those in a way that's impactful. And so that's why I believe experiential learning is the best way to learn.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me as though you are highly attentive to maintaining a balance between advanced lesson planning, i.e., putting the dots on your ankle for the snake bite, as well as adapting to the immediacy of a situation and making a decision, I'm going to intervene or not. Do you think people who are formally trained in education have an advantage about their skill set to do that? Or is this something that can easily be learned by adult leaders?
I'm going to say when it comes to formal training education and being able to teach experientially, absolutely not. There is almost nothing that I learned in my PhD program that allowed me to teach effectively. And in fact, if anything, I would say that formal education probably was more of a hindrance to teaching experientially than it was otherwise. My master's degree, my specialty was in environmental education, and that was a much better program than in terms of teaching youth. But the reality is that leaders need to learn to think about how they can teach programming in the outdoors or in a realistic environment that is not in the same manner that we teach in the classroom. Classroom teaching, while it's effective for getting a lot of information over a reasonably short period of time, is not at all effective in teaching people how to think and teaching people how to troubleshoot and teaching people how to recognize problems or in teaching people how to deal with making decisions that allow themselves to get themselves out of problems once they've started. So, no, I don't think formal education is necessary at all.
Yeah, see, you disappoint me. I had envisioned that you talk to me about how you take your scouts out and have them break out their notebooks and begin outlining their dissertation proposal. Just
I, you know, maybe I'll change the way I teach, and next year it'll be different. For now, Not so much.
Yeah, trust me, they'll have more fun just doing what they're doing right now. Hey, we're coming short on time. First, I want to thank you for your time, but I also want to give you an opportunity to say anything you'd like to the people viewing this program now and into the future. So at this point in time, the camera and microphone is entirely yours.
I'm going to talk about one of my pet peeves in the scouting program, and it's really not part of the scouting program. It's the concept that people have and espouse of eagling out. I hate that term. I became an Eagle Scout. I achieved the Eagle Scout rank shortly after my 15th birthday. And the concept of eagling out means that scouting is over. You've achieved the pinnacle. There's nothing else to learn. There's nothing else to achieve. There's nothing else to do. And the reality is that couldn't be further from the truth. I stayed in scouting in my unit because of the high adventure activities that we did. And we were always going new places and we were trying new things. I mean, after I became an Eagle Scout, we started doing some rock climbing stuff. And so I got exposed to that. Later on, we started to do very basic ice axe and crampon work and looking at ice climbing stuff. And that's outside the guidelines for safe scouting now. It wasn't then. And those kinds of activities kept me engaged in the program. I was eager to stay in the program because of the things that I could do. Even with advancement, after you attain Eagle Scout, there's things that you can do. You've got the Distinguished Conservation Award, which is a new award that very few people have earned. You've got the National Outdoor Award that encourages you to do cycling and conservation work and camping and hiking. You've got a whole series of outdoor adventure awards like the Historic Trails Award or the 50 Mile Afoot and Afloat Award. You've got the Order of the Arrow, our honor society that does conservation activities and nationwide leadership development. The OAHA, the Order of the Arrow High Adventure Program, working at Philmont. So there's lots and lots of programs for youth to do after they've achieved Eagle Scout, but before they turn 18. And even after they turn 18, as you mentioned, we've got the venturing program, which is for youth 14 to 20. When you turn 21, you're no longer a youth participant, but that whole time you've got all types of adventures open to you. Flying, scuba diving, sailing, boating, climbing, hiking, cooking. They've got vocational programs with firefighting and law enforcement. So there's lots of different activities that you can do that ways. And then after you turn 21, we talk about, I'm no longer a youth, the program is over. But the reality is it doesn't need to be over because you can now take a position as an adult leader. We've got programs available if you're an Eagle Scout through NISA, the National Eagle Scout Association, for networking and professional development. We've got college fraternities, service fraternities that are set up around the scouting program, where as a scouting participant, you automatically go into a service fraternity, a Greek fraternity, as part of your college career. So even though you may no longer be a youth participant, there are many opportunities to participate within the scouting program and still continue to provide opportunities for you yourself to grow both personally, academically, and professionally after the quote unquote formal scouting program is over. And so I would like to say as my final parting word is scouting never finishes. If you embrace the program and give to the program, you will get as much or more out of the program than you ever put into it. And I would close with saying that that's been true for me. As much time as I spent in the program as a youth, I've put in more time as an adult, and I continue to reap the benefits of the scouting program as an adult. And so don't think just because you've eagled or you've turned 18 or you've turned 21 that you need to be done with the program, because there's lots that you can still get from it as you're giving back and providing for the youth in the future.
Yeah, scouting really is a lifespan program from early to late life. So thank you very much for that insight and that recommendation. I think people should listen to what you said and heed the message. I want to thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I hope to meet you in person sometime in the near future. So thank you
Maybe
so
on our
much.
trip to Tanzania and Kenya.
Hey, there we go. There we go. Hey, thanks again, Jeff. We
Thank you
appreciate
so
your
much for
time.
having me again. And to all of you in the audience, I wish you happy scouting, happy trails. And for those of you who have never been in the scouting program, please take the time to look into it. Because even if you don't have children or your children aren't yet the right age, the time is coming. And, you know, our youth can use the help, and quite frankly, our society can use the scouts and the lessons that we teach.
And from coast to coast, there is ample opportunity to become involved. Hey, thanks you once again. And that's it for this episode of Eagle Scouts Worldviews. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time around.